never seen.
Let us strive every moment of our lives to make ourselves better and better to the best of our ability.
Sometimes masquerading as the Spider, thus concealing his identity from both criminals and the police.
The weed of crime bears bitter fruit. Crime does not pay. The shadow knows.
I was in 8th grade and I saw The Derek Devil on a bookstore, but I didn't buy it. I bought the Science Fiction Hall of Fame. But later that summer I went back, I saw that cool logo, and I started right at the beginning reading Doc number 1, The Man of Bronze. Well, like they say, you know, you never forget your first. It's just the excitement, the globe-spanning adventure, it was the excitement of the character, and of course those amazing Bama covers. And maybe it's partly nostalgic. Like I said, you go back to what turned you on right at the beginning. The project is partly a memorialization. It's partly a memoir, an accounting of what the character has done for other people like myself. I felt very inspired to go into commercial art and illustration. My goal was to work in books, and what I would hope to happen with this project is it reaches as many people as possible and shows them what a childhood hero or passion can do or lead to. I started this project with Act 3 back in technically December of 2021. I saw a documentary called Jingle Bells Rock, and it was all about the people that are passionate about novelty Christmas songs. And in the documentary, I saw people digging through bins at record shows, and I turned to my wife and I says, "That's just like these Doc Savage people. That's what turns me on." And I pitched the idea to my friends in the business, and we decided, yeah, let's try that documentary. So I went in 2022, I went to Windy City in Chicago. I went to PulpFest in Pittsburgh, and just started interviewing and talking to people. So this has been going on for 2.5 years.
58 minutes, final cut, roughly?
The final cut is 58 minutes.
That's down from how many minutes of filming?
It could have been 2 hours. I had 70 individual sit-down interviews with over 50 different people. And besides Chicago and Pittsburgh, we went to Tennessee, and then we did Zoom calls, Zoom interviews with people in Quebec, California, Florida, Eastern Pennsylvania. It was a lot to put together and cull down, because the audience for this film is just the regular people, not the Doc fans. It's to show people what fandom is all about.
Were there any surprising takeaways? I mean, you're steeped in Doc Savage and his world, and you interact regularly with people who are equally steeped in Doc Savage and passionate to perhaps an unhealthy degree, some might argue. So what kind of things did you take away from this that were surprising to you? Or?
Probably the most surprising thing was the deep friendships and bonds that come from the common interest in Doc Savage. I knew many of these people that I got to talk to and put on camera from the internet, from 1996 and onward. But I never went to any of the conventions. I never met any of them in person. And so when I started this in 2022 and finally met everybody, and I was struck by, it's not just about these old magazines and books. It's about the friendships and the commonality. I was struck by how similar everybody's stories were. The discoveries of Doc in a drugstore spinner rack or a department store or a bookstore. And everybody has a story about their first Doc, their favorite cover. You know, everybody I talked to did the same things I did that I felt so weird about. Laying all the books out on the floor, putting them in numbers, the patchwork quilt, if you will, of color, you know, all tied together with that amazing Comet logo. Everybody did that. And all of a sudden, you didn't feel so weird. I was struck by the friendship, the sharing that goes on with this group. It's not all about who has the most Docs wins. Everybody is very helpful to each other to find things.
So you've debuted the film now at PulpFest. Obviously, that's the ultimate audience. It's shown twice. What's the reaction been so far?
No, the reaction has been very supportive. And again, the Doc Savage community is very supportive of each other. But I had a number of people tell me it actually brought a tear to their eye in some of the stories that people related. And I had a number of people say, do you want criticism? And, you know, as a creator, as a commercial creator, absolutely. That's how you improve things. But people were hesitant to mention things. And when I said, yes, tell me what didn't work for you. Tell me what gave you pause and so forth. Then they could open up.
So next you take it on the circuit and through film festivals with a documentary focus. What do you anticipate when you're not screening to Doc Savage cognoscenti and people who are really steeped in the character? That's what you're trying to really reach beyond just the core audience.
Today, as a sneak preview, was just part of gathering that reaction and kind of from my people, did I represent them well? Because again, the goal is to show this to other people that this isn't weird, this isn't nerdy. As one person says in the documentary, we're little boys doing what little boys do, but we realize we have to be grown-ups at the same time. So the challenge here was explaining who Doc was, explaining what the stories are about, giving a little history about them so that the viewer has a context to follow along with everybody's experience with that. And I think we did pretty well. We spent about 4 or 5 minutes explaining Doc at the beginning and trying to keep it brisk, trying to keep the people engaged in what comes next. And it's also about the history of this fandom over the course of 60 or 70 years. So it goes from fanzines, which are, stamp on a Xeroxed bundle of papers stapled together, all the way up to the internet, all the way up to meeting and traveling in person. So it just, technology, how it helped pull everybody together.
You talked about the demographic of Doc Savage fans who are now still enthusiasts, all of them probably north of 50, at the lower kinder end, probably north of 60. Chuck Walsh, who runs the Doc Savage website, the Flea Run, among other sites, and editor of the Bronze Gazette, has kind of declared this to be the final generation of Doc fans. Do you dispute that? Do you have hope that he continues in some form?
I don't dispute that. Chuck has a lot of very valid points. That's what happens with these characters. But as another person in the interview, Bill Preston, says that so many of these iconic figures that were steeped in Doc Savage, they may not even know it. And maybe this film shows people how these iconic heroic images are needed and necessary, and it awakens them to the origins of popular heroic fiction.
Live in a time of the anti-hero and kind of self-aware comic book movies and multiverses and that sort of thing. Doc Savage had sort of a Boy Scout quality and philanthropist, and he's talented across ranges of different disciplines. Is that a character that can be made to work in our times, or that we might even be hungry for and not know we are? Or
I think that's a good point. I think we may be hungry for this kind of altruistic Boy Scout type hero without knowing it. And I think that's shown by many of the behaviors and many of the support of this tight-knit group of fans, that there is a place for a hero who stands for what is right and what is good.
So 2033 will be Doc Savage's centennial as a intellectual property. Will we have anything available to us at that point, do you think? Or
if we do, I think it would be in the form of some sort of streaming show, something. I think if fans want Doc Savage to continue, they're going to have to be flexible on the characters as far as race, gender, and nationalities, things like that. They're going to have to, and obviously the technologies are going to change. Will there be something in 2033? I think so. But it's not going to be the 1930s Doc.
Yeah, if you look at the film attempts to do the Phantom, the Shadow, the Rocketeer, some of these were really good quality movies, but there are core fans who believe Doc Savage is the 1930s, even though he was moving in real time. His magazine had gone one more year, he would have been in the era of tail fins, and it would have been the 50s. It seems to me you're saying Doc Savage has to get beyond vintage Depression era presentation forms.
Absolutely, Doc Savage will have to keep up. Like Tony Isabella, the veteran comics writer, says in the documentary, he couldn't imagine Doc not doing something about climate change. So that's, Doc is going to have to adapt to the world. My hope is that it will find an audience, people will be interested, and they will explore who Doc Savage was. A real win for this would be if Condé Nast, the IP owner, sees it and is inspired to do something with it. You said, what's next?
Yeah, James, that was going to be my next question. So, yeah, I mean, do you have some other projects in mind beyond this one?
I do. After 2.5 years on this one, I don't know that I would I'm 62 years old. I think now that this is in the can, now it takes some work, obviously, to get it out there and find that audience. When I would start the next one, I know I do have an idea for a next documentary. It would be a much tighter focus. It would focus on the comics industry and how that has changed. And I do have some ideas about the people and the lens. It would not be 50 people. It would be 1 or 2.
So you also are doing some illustrations now for Pulp inflected publications.
Right.
Pulp-driven publications. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Some people talk about new pulp and a new adventure fiction, basically, is what it is. And 30 years ago, I was doing illustrations for role-playing games, for Dungeons and Dragons and West End games and things like that. And now, at this stage of my life, I'm starting to turn back to that and draw those kind of illustrations for some of these pulp publishers. I've done work for Becky Books. I've done work for Airship 27 in the last year. And so, as you mentioned before, the comics work and the caricature work and all of that, I'm finding time to start to re-enter that adventure fiction illustration.
Would you like to take a try at writing something and illustrating it too at this point, or?
I mean, I could never do a novel. I wouldn't have the bandwidth to focus on that. I could imagine short stories or vignettes. I could imagine some sort of combination of art and story, art and word, not so much as a graphic novel, but I have done graphic stories, but 5, 6, 8 pages at the most, so which is a possibility. I hate to sound like the Joker from that Batman movie. I just do stuff. If I do it well, and if I have a little bit of foresight in the beginning of a target, it usually ends up paying off. I don't know who it was said any time you enjoyed wasting time wasn't wasted time. So.
The weed of crime bears bitter fruit. Crime does not pay. The shadow knows.